Hey guys, Brian here. Today we're going to be talking about different ways to collect sap from your maple trees. Stick around. So one of the most common ways to collect sap is using the bucket. For this method you take a spile, which is a little aluminum piece that you drill into the tree about 1.5 to 2 inches. Tap this in and then you hang the bucket from it and put a lid on top of the bucket. I did this for the first several years. It's a great way to collect sap. It's just a little labor intensive. You have to come on out once or twice a day to empty these out into a larger bin, and you know, they do tend to collect things in them. Moths, tiny little fleas, little bugs, and you have to filter all that out obviously before you can boil it down. So maybe not as clean or sanitary as other methods, but this is by far the most popular way to collect maple sap, especially when you're first starting out. A very similar method to the bucket is they make bags. Same thing, you drill a hole 1.5 to 2 inches deep into the tree, you pound in the spile or the tap, and then you would hang a bag system off of that to collect it. That's a little more sanitary because there's not a big open top bucket hanging off the tree, right? Moths can't fly in there, etc. So that's a little bit better, but now I'm going to show you what I've moved on to using a tubing system. This here is the type of tubing system that I use. It's a 5/16 inch diameter. So I like this tubing. It's the Leader 30P. It's the first tube I've ever used. It's the only tube I've ever used, and it's done me well. So I don't have experience with other tubing, but they do make stretchier, more flexible tubing. I like the Leader 30P, and I'll show you the overall system that I have, and then I'll get into the why and the how of it. So when you're using tubing, you have to make sure that you have slope. I'm lucky, I have most of my land is on a hill, so I have pretty good slope downwards to allow the sap to drain out. If you don't have slope, you have to start really high on one end of your tubing and then gradually slope that down to your collection point. So here we are, we're on the uphill end of my tubing system. So what we have here is my 30P 5/16 tubing getting threaded through the hollow core rope, and it just holds on by friction. So the tubing goes through the yellow rope, it actually wraps around the tree, and then it comes to a line end fitting. They make a number of different fittings to terminate your lines. This is the one that I use, and then off of that, this portion right here is where you would actually put your spile or your tap, and then from there you would drill a hole in the tree and tap it. It would drain down, and it'll start draining downhill. So this is the downhill section. This is my first tree in the downhill section. Coming from uphill, you hit a T, and again they make all different fittings. They make Ys and Ts and different things. I use mostly Ts. From there it continues downhill, or it comes up into what's called the drop. On the end of the drop I use these plastic check valve spiles. There's a little ball bearing in there that prevents backflow coming back into the tree. Supposedly that keeps the tree healthier throughout the season and allows it to flow longer. So from here we would take our drill bit, drill 1.5 into the tree, take our spile, and use just a light tap with a hammer, tap it in until it's nice and snug. So this is the end of my line, the uphill side of my line. I'm just going to walk you through and show you how I snake it around trees. Now this isn't leveled. I had to change the level of these lines for the off season so I could drive my quad around and underneath them, because they do cross over my path. So, but it'll just give you an idea how you need to pull it tight and snake it around trees. You can see it just snakes through the trees downhill. So at the bottom of the hill, at the bottom of your line, you just have the tubing dump into a 55-gallon drum or a 30-gallon food-grade drum, and that way you don't have to check on this every day. You can check every 3 or 4 days, and it saves you a lot of time emptying buckets, and it's just a whole lot easier. You don't have as many collection points, right? I maybe have 5 or 6 big barrels I have to check rather than 60 or 70 small little buckets that I have to check once or twice a day. So it works out good for us. Real quick, if you are going to do a tubing method like this, I highly recommend you get a sight level, maybe $20 at Home Depot, but you can look through it and you can tell where level is. So I can look right down one of these tubing lines and it'll tell me if it's got the proper slope to allow drainage of the sap out. So another must, if you're going to be using tubing, I believe, is a tubing tool. It's basically a pair of vice grips mounted on some pliers, and you can make these yourself if you have a welder and want to spend an evening doing it. I did that for a couple years and they ended up breaking both years, so I just invested in a properly built one. But it's a must, I think. You put your tubing through the vice grips, clamp them down, you can cut your tubing, open it up, put your fitting in, close it all back together, and you're good to go. So that's it, guys. The tubing method is the method that we currently use to collect our sap. It all runs downhill, central collection points. We can come once a day or once every 3rd day, collect that sap, take it down to our evaporator, and begin the boiling process. And we're probably going to touch on that a bit in a future video. And for the time being, I appreciate you watching. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.